Short Questions, Short Answers by Torah teacher Ariel and eBible. Copyright Tatesei Torah Ministries, 2015, all rights reserved. All right, let's take a look at our question for tonight. The question is, what does Paul mean when he says to not let anyone judge us in regard to keeping the Sabbath? You guys understand the question? In other words, how do we Messianics interpret Colossians 2:16? That's basically what we're going to be talking about tonight. All right, here's my answer. The verse reads, "Therefore let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath." And that's, of course, Colossians 2:16 as rendered from the ESV. And we looked at that in the liturgy. And again, we're going to be talking about the traditional understanding of this particular passage and how it bears relevance for Christians and Messianics today. And we're going to see if we can sort out some of the differences between these two interpretations. The traditional interpretation of this passage suggests a scenario where a first century Torah observant believer is passing judgment on a non-Torah observant believer for not keeping the Torah. You guys understand that so far? I don't need to spend a lot of time in the slides because I'm going to explain it later on. However, this doesn't accord with the historical context in light of what we learned in answer 6 above. The summary of the answer 6 above is this. The Judaisms of Paul's day felt that Torah keeping didn't save them. Instead, they felt that Torah keeping was done to maintain their place already secured by Jewish ethnicity. And again, don't worry, we'll talk about this a little more in the longer answer. So based on the understanding of first century Jewish social interaction with Torah on a covenantal level, right, using that as our base background, it's actually more likely that Paul understood that Gentile believers would be joining existing Jewish communities in his day, and that these Jewish communities would feel uncomfortable with Gentiles keeping Torah as Gentiles while at the same time claiming the promises of God through Yeshua. Understand? It's more likely then that the judgment being passed was not from Torah observant believers down to non-Torah observant believers. Instead, it was in fact the opposite in my understanding. It was likely that judgment was being passed from the unbelieving Jewish community to Torah-observant Gentile Christians for keeping the Torah without going through the ritual of conversion first. That's the way I understand the passage. I think that's a strong candidate. So remember, first century Israel actually espoused to a Jewish-only community. And so in their minds, without conversion, Gentiles cannot be genuine covenant members. There was no allowance for Gentiles in their groups. The conversion policy was the barrier that separated the two groups. And in my understanding of the social fabric of the first century communities, particularly the Jewish ones, this was a strong enough barrier to prevent Gentiles from being seen as genuine covenant members and being allowed to actually walk into certain parts of the Torah. Remember, first century Jewish way of thinking, here it is in a nutshell. We had Jews on one side of the wall, Gentiles on another side of the wall, and conversion was the vehicle that took a Gentile over the wall into the Jewish community. Conversion was needed in order to walk into the works of the law. You have to convert first and become a legally recognized Jew first, and once you cross that barrier, once you scale that wall, once you pass that entry point, so to say, the rest of the Torah and the blessings of the covenant are handed to you as a Gentile, and this is only after becoming a Jewish covenant member. Does that make sense? So, in a word, it is historically tenable, in my understanding, that unbelieving Israel became jealous and outraged at Paul's teachings at the newly fledged Gentile membership, the Gentile inclusion into Israel via association with a slain Jewish martyr, sans circumcision, that is, minus circumcision. Check out my podcasts, which are available on iTunes. You can search for me in the store under the search term Ariel HaNavi. But if you prefer to watch your theology, check out my YouTube channel, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and click the bell for notifications. New content is added weekly or even daily.